It's Wednesday, folks, and you know what that means. I'm Michael Fiumefreddo, and you're watching Coast to Coast Sports, the only show for the fans, by the fans. And if you've been watching the show from day one, which a lot of you have, you've been hearing me say all along that a head coach would be fired by week 4 in the NFL season. However, if you also know anything about the incompetence of the New York Jets front office, that goes from their owner, their GM, their players, their coaching staff, you would know it's not them. Yes, after I predicted they would lose to the Denver Broncos and third-string quarterback Brett Rippon, they said they were going to stick with Adam Gase through the whole season. Now, us Jet fans are really mad at this, and it's basically ruining Sam Darnold's career as we speak. We're watching it die out and just fade off into the darkness somewhere else. But the head coach that was fired was maybe a shocker if you haven't watched football since 2015, but Bill O'Brien of the Houston Texans, their head coach and their GM actually, was fired, relieved of all duties, effective immediately, and Romeo Crennel will take over as the head coach of the 0-4 Houston Texans. Now that's a destination I think a lot of head coaching candidates are going to like. They got a great quarterback in Deshaun Watson. They got a lot of good offensive pieces. Will Fuller's there. And just a bunch of other guys on the defense as well. You still have J.J. Watt. If he's ever healthy, he's a monster. But maybe that could persuade some guys like Eric Bieniemy, or maybe a head college guy, Lincoln Riley comes to mind, Ryan Day. But there's a lot of other sports news. We'll talk about a lot of NFL today. But the New York Rangers in the NFL draft selected Alexis Lafreniere with the number 1 overall pick. He's apparently being hyped up to be the next Connor McDavid. So Ranger fans, I know a lot of them, you guys got a great guy in you apparently. So hopefully they can start turning stuff around and see what they can do next season. The Lakers are all just about won the NBA Finals this year. They're up 3-1 on the Heat. Won pretty convincingly yesterday, even with Bam Adebayo coming back. I said it was going to be a 5-game series, so hopefully if they win on Friday, that prediction will be right. I didn't get a lot of my predictions right on last week. I'll be honest with you, a lot of my scorching hot takes weren't good. The Adam Gase thing kind of fizzled away. But there was one thing I was spot on about, and it's got to go to my MVP of the week, Robert Tonyan, Green Bay Packers tight end. I said it on Casual Saturdays if you were listening then on Spotify. We do those every Saturday, and you could even catch these episodes in a podcast version on there. But I said he was going to have a good week. He was playing the Falcons, who aren't that great of a team, on defense versus the tight end. And not only did he show out, win me my game, he put up 33 points. So I'll ring the bell to you, Robert Tonyan. Great job. You're on a bye week this week, but hopefully in week 6, I can't wait to reinsert you back into my starting lineup, and we'll win out this year, hopefully. We'll talk about him a little more when we get into some other waiver wire pickups I think you should consider this week if you're a fantasy football aficionado like myself, as well as some guys, superstars in the NFL that have exceeded their expectations this year and are playing a lot better than advertised. But right now, we're a month into the NFL season. Most teams, I say that because not everyone has, but most teams have played 4 games already. The exception being the Titans and the Steelers, who had their game postponed. So I decided to make a little power ranking. I have all 32 teams listed right here. You can't really see it. I will show it maybe later, but I have some pretty hot takes according to what the ESPN guys think, what Colin Cowherd said on his show, all those other media sites, Bleacher Report as well. And yeah, I'll start off with my first bang. The Seahawks at number 1 over the Kansas City Chiefs, Green Bay Packers, Buffalo Bills, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I just think Seattle's offense is really good. Russell Wilson's been killing it. They're saying he's cooking. But although their defense isn't really there, he's still the MVP candidate, likely going to win that award. And Just, a lot of their guys are really stepping up. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Chris Carson. I won't get really too much into that, but there's one team out of those top 5 that I didn't name, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. I have them at number 6. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's not that I wanted to put them there. It was more, I don't think they're as good as the other 5 teams ahead of them. And you look at the teams ahead of them, you got Seattle, I already talked about them. Kansas City's 4-0 and beat the Ravens in week 3. Green Bay and Tampa Bay, both of their quarterbacks, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, are having resurgences in these offenses. And Buffalo looks phenomenal. So I don't know. You could make the case for the Ravens over any one of those teams, but I'm going to keep them at 6 for now. They definitely have a lot of room to improve, especially quarterback Lamar Jackson. Not that he's playing bad or anything. It's just he hasn't thrown for over 300 yards in a game this season. There are a lot of guys ahead of him that really shouldn't be. You talk about Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold have more passing yards on the year than him, and Big Ben and Ryan Tannehill as well, who have only played in 3 games. So a guy that's played 4 games has less yards than 2 guys that have had 3 games. I don't know. He's got 8 total touchdowns on the year to 1 interception, but the way guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson are playing, I don't see this Ravens team being as high up as a contender as those guys. But I do, however, have a sleeper team in my top 7, and that's who I'm giving number 7. I think the LA Rams, who I mentioned a few weeks back, they're really showing that they can be Super Bowl contenders as well. They're 3-1 on the year, but their offense and defense just look so balanced. Must be something about these LA teams. You talk about the Lakers, the Dodgers all having balanced teams, but the Rams are just the next one up. Out of all the other teams that are ahead of them, only one has a top 10 offense and defense in terms of yards per game and yards allowed, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Ravens are also 7th in rush yards per game without their stud running back who they signed 2 years ago, Todd Gurley. Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson are really carrying the weight there. And Aaron Donald's really carrying that defense in terms of sacks. They're 5th, they're top 5 in the league in that category. Jared Goff looks really good. He's playing like he should be as the number 1 overall pick a few years back. And I'm excited to see what this team can do. They got a pretty easy schedule. They'll have to play Seattle twice. San Francisco isn't the same, and Arizona's looking like they fell off a little bit. Now, speaking of 3-1 teams, I have the Bears at a pretty low spot in my power rankings, 19th, behind teams such as the Lions, who are 2-2, I believe, the Eagles, who are 1-2-1, Cowboys 1-3, Niners 2-2. So yeah, that's weird, don't you think, that a team that's at the top of their division right now in a wild card spot, if the season ended today, why are they so low? It's because they don't have a quarterback. It's that simple. I watched Nick Foles play against the Colts on Sunday. Did not look like he did against Atlanta. Yeah, you can say, oh, he was so good. He beat Atlanta. He came back 3-1. Yeah, listen to who they beat. They beat the Falcons, who have given up a lead in 3 out of the 4 games this year. And then the other one, they got blown out from the beginning. So I don't think that's a great accomplishment. The Lions look like they're getting better. They're improving after their 2 losses in the early season. After their loss to Chicago, actually, in week 1. The Vikings beat the Texans last week. They are starting to pick it up. They can put up points. And then you got Green Bay, obviously, who's leading the division at 4-0. So I don't see much room for this team to improve. I think they've really hit their ceiling. 6 wins at most for this team that's gotten off to a really hot start. And I think they should be looking to move on from Foles, from Trubisky. Maybe Justin Fields is available for them wherever they draft if they start to tank now. And when I made this list, I started breaking teams down into tiers. This is the last 2 teams we'll talk about. But it was like I had guys in Super Bowl contenders, playoff contenders, and then I had like my sleeper playoff teams. That was probably the biggest category of them all. But 2 teams in there that are below the 500 line, not sure what they're really working on, but that's the Cowboys and the Eagles. I have them as sleeper playoff teams because they're both in the NFC East. I mean, someone's got to make it out of that division, right? The NFL can't just say, hey, you guys stink, I'm taking away your division spot, we're giving it to a wild card, right? Maybe, but I don't think that's going to happen. The NFL won't do that. So I have the Cowboys at 16 and the Eagles at 17. The Eagles against the 49ers, granted they were playing with Jimmy Garoppolo's backups, but they look like they've woken up. They're adding Jalen Hurts to the offense. I really like to see that. Their receivers are getting healthy. Carson Wentz played a great game. He finally turned his cap forward instead of backwards, and they look like they can make some noise in this week division. They're going to have to play the Giants twice and the football team one more time. The Cowboys, on the other hand, I don't see an issue. I think they just can't win on the defensive end. I mean, you look at guys like Dak Prescott, who's right now playing the best football of his life, really fighting for that contract that he so desperately needs. Nobody knows if he deserves it yet, apparently, in that front office down in Dallas. But right now, Dak Prescott leads the league in passing yards, well over 1,600. He's currently on pace, and I found this stat on ESPN, for 6,760 passing yards on the year. That would be record-shattering in the NFL. He's got 9 touchdowns, and along with probably a top 3 receiving core in the league. I was doing some research for a different segment and actually found out that Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are the top duo in terms of yardage per game. So you can make the argument there that they are the best, if not one of the best. Shifting gears now to the fantasy world of sports, including football. I was spot on with my waiver wire pickups last week, so I thought I'd give you guys some more. I mean, I'm 3-1 in my league. I hope I can maybe give some advice to my competitors even who aren't doing too hot. I'm looking at you guys in the Money League. And ladies, I know a lot of you guys watch this show, and we were thinking about fun segments we can do. Maybe this will help you out. Maybe you're on a date, you want to talk to a friend about fantasy, a guy, be like, hey, who are you picking up on the waiver wire this week? Well, it's actually past Wednesday, so a lot of guys have been picked up already. Maybe the big names like Dearness Johnson, who's filling in for an injured Nick Chubb. Robert Tonyan might be there. I don't know. We'll talk about him in a bit, but just these are some guys. I looked at my waiver wire this morning after all the things have processed. These guys were still available, and I really think they're worth considering picking up. I got a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, and a tight end. So we'll start off with the quarterback. Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford both have byes, and then you got Matt Ryan and Deshaun Watson, who haven't really played their best football this year. You might be looking for a streaming option or replacement. So I think you should look no further than Justin Herbert. He's the rookie out of Oregon playing for the Chargers. He's got 3 career starts. He's 0-3 in them, but we're talking about fantasy here. He looks great on the football field in terms of how he's playing. He's put up points each week, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. It was good for 23 points last week, which finished 9th out of all quarterbacks. This week, he's got a pretty easy matchup. He's going against the New Orleans Saints defense that's given up the 6th most points to opposing quarterbacks this year. So he's a guy, he's getting his feet wet, he's figuring it out. He hasn't won games, but that doesn't really matter in fantasy. So I think he's worth a look. And when you look at his schedule coming up, you got the Jets, who made Brett Rippon look like a Hall of Fame quarterback. You got Miami, who's playing good football, but Russell Wilson put up some numbers against him, and Jacksonville, who isn't the best defense. They all have a combined 2 wins. So not only will I think Justin Herbert will have great fantasy production this next month, I think he'll also get his first win of his career, maybe even 2 or 3. But that's yet to see. However, there are a lot of injuries going on in the running back category. You talk about Christian McCaffrey, who's still on IR for my team. Nick Chubb just went down. Saquon Barkley's out for the year. That happened in week 2. Austin Eckler went down. The list goes on and on. I feel like the first round of everyone's fantasy drafts is just all out right now. I mean, you got Barkley, McCaffrey, Michael Thomas has been hurt. There's one other guy. Devontae Adams could possibly come back this week, but that's 4 or 5 guys that have gotten hurt and looking to need replacement for. So A guy that just got finished being injured, coming off IR last Monday night for the game against Kansas City, is Damian Harris for the New England Patriots. And you may know this guy a lot if you watch college football. He played for Alabama, 4 years there, split time with Bo Scarborough, won a couple national championships with the Crimson Tide. But he was, in his second year in the league, he was said to be very impressive in the training camps in the preseason. Then, unfortunately, he got put on IR with a broken finger injury. So he's a guy that now Sony Michel's out, their other star running back that they picked up pretty early in most drafts. But now they bring in Damian Harris back into the lineup. He got 17 carries in his first game back against the Chiefs. That he went for 100 yards. He had one big one for, I think, 41 yards. So a lot of the production came from there, but still 16 carries for 60 yards is a solid stat line. And I think he needs to get a little more work in the passing game. I don't know if he will. You can never really trust Bill Belichick anyways. But he's a guy that could be a workhorse back. I mean, you obviously want to sit him a couple weeks. He's playing a very good Denver defense against the running back this week. But I think as the season goes on, if he gets a good matchup, you could definitely consider him as a flex player or a bye-week replacement as we get deeper into the season. And who knows, maybe he turns out to be a top 10 running back in this season. Moving on now, I got a wide receiver. They're not really that injured compared to the running back category. They're not as depleted. I mean, you got Michael Thomas, you got Devontae Adams. They should be coming back this week. But it's never good. It's never a bad thing to have too much depth. I mean, we're still only in week 4. Who knows what could happen? I mean, we're seeing it already. It's been the most 2020 year, actually, in the NFL I could possibly think of in terms of injuries. So, Brandon Ayuk. You may know him from a viral video that was taken off of Twitter. They put Donald Trump's head on him, and he was hurdling the coronavirus. I thought it was pretty funny. But he's a rookie wide receiver out of Arizona State. He's getting touches from the passing game and the running game. Now, granted, right now, the quarterback situation's up in the air in San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo should be coming back. He's going to have Deebo Samuel to compete for touches with. But Brandon Ayuk had two 30-plus rushing touchdowns over the past week at the wide receiver position. So they're definitely getting different ways to involve him in the offense. They want to get him the ball. I think he can be a nice addition to your fantasy roster as kind of like a stash play. Nothing much more than that. Maybe an injury or two to the rest of that team. When Jimmy Garoppolo comes back, he can be a guy that you consider starting at like a wide receiver 3 spot or a flex. Now, I don't know if it's cheating or not. I'll let you guys decide. But for my tight end spot, I have to talk about Robert Tonyan because I picked him up in one league, and I checked my other leagues just to see if he was still there, and nobody really touched him. I mean, he's the number 2 tight end right now in PPR. So there's a lot of guys. The only guy ahead of him is Travis Kelce right now, who's the best tight end in football. They seem to be involving him. He has a touchdown in every game he's played so far, including 3 last Monday against the Falcons. But maybe the reason that nobody's picked him up is because he's on a bye. Maybe nobody wants to carry 2 tight ends kind of situation. But I'm here to tell you that it doesn't matter. Just pick him up. You're never going to get this chance again. I think he's going to continue this production throughout the season. I mean, he's just a no-name tight end that really is making a name for himself now this year. They're involving him in the offense. He's got a ton of catches already this year, 5 touchdowns. And if you were one of the 4.5 people, or 4.5% of people in NFL.com fantasy football leagues that started him this weekend, I congratulate you. Thank you for listening to my podcast if you did. And I hope I got you a win, you know. There's nothing else. He was only rostered in less than 10% of leagues. That number's definitely shot up now. But if he's still available in yours, I'd think about picking him up. Just some other guys in case you think I did cheat and he's not available in your league anymore. Mo Alley Cox is still out there scoring for the Indianapolis Colts. And Dalton Schultz, I know there's a lot of targets going around in Dallas, but he's been putting up some points. Speaking of guys that have been putting up points, though, and really playing some of their best football of their careers, a lot of guys were being slept on in the beginning of the year, and now they're looking like superstars in the next generation of players that are going to take over this league. I mean, so my top 5 this week, I'm going to do top 5 players that have played better than advertised in this NFL season right now. Starting off with number 5, we have Aaron Jones, a staple of the Moneymakers Fantasy Football franchise. I mean, you don't have him this year, unfortunately, but he's been written off the past 3 years. 2 years ago, he was suspended for a couple games, and then an injury to Jamal Williams threw him in the spotlight. He's been a star ever since. Last season, they kind of brought Jamal Williams back into the fold, and he was starting to get some more carries, splitting time. But Jones still produced. Now this year at the draft, they drafted A.J. Dillon out of Boston College, and people thought, oh, it's over for Aaron Jones. He's not doing anything anymore. Don't even look at him. Don't touch him. But right now, he's top 5 rushing player in terms of yards. He's got 6 total touchdowns on the year. And he just looks like a stud. You know, there's nothing else to say, really. I don't think he'll be written off that much longer. I think he's the guy in Green Bay for at least 3 to 4 more years. And if you're a fantasy player, he's a guy you might want to take in like that 2nd or 3rd round every year until he's out of his prime. And he scored a touchdown in that game against Atlanta. But someone who put up a goose egg in that game, I had him at number 3 in this list and then bumped him back after his performance on Monday night, was Calvin Ridley. And yeah, Calvin Ridley had 5 targets against Green Bay. He caught none of them. 0 yards, 0 touchdowns. But let's not let one game fool us. This man is having a tremendous year so far. He's got Julio Jones, who's a star wide receiver, sharing time with him on the opposite side. But Matt Ryan doesn't care. He's throwing it to Calvin Ridley most of the time. He's killing it in both real life and in fantasy. I know I keep referring to the fantasy football world, but in terms of filling in for Julio right now, he's obviously been out a few games. He's been doing a fantastic job. Right now, one of the top receivers in the league. He's got 6 touchdowns through 3 games and 349 receiving yards in that same time. I mean, he's played 4 games, but disregarding that last one. They're both in the top 10 in terms of league receiving yards. And going back to fantasy, he was a guy that I saw going in like the 6th or 7th, 8th round maybe. Right now he's the 6th best wide receiver, so that's a steal for whoever has him. And it just turns out that everyone who drafted Calvin Ridley apparently thinks they're like a genius for doing so. I have to shout out Jonathan in one league, Austin in another. Every time Calvin Ridley catches a touchdown, I get a text or a Snapchat from them just saying, I told you all Calvin Ridley was going to be the next GOAT. Yeah, I don't think you did, to be totally honest. Moving on to number 3, Myles Garrett. Now, this guy you may know from his infamous ripping off Mason Rudolph's helmet and just smashing him onto it. Got suspended a few games. I thought from that he would have gotten the reputation as kind of like a bad boy or a heel guy in the NFL, but that's not really the case. I mean, he's a superstar from the defensive end position. He was picked number 1 overall in 2017, and this year he's really having a breakout performance. He's tied for first for most sacks on the year with 5 already through 4 games. He's tied with Zadarius Smith, who's a linebacker, and linebackers tend to get more sacks from their position on blitzes rather than a defensive end. But right now he's tied for first with 5. He's kind of playing like that J.J. Watt kind of role for the Cleveland Browns, who are 3-1. And this is actually an interesting stat because not only is he performing this year, he's performing his whole career, and I think he'll get even better as time goes on. But I saw this stat on Instagram. He has the highest sacks per game for a career number. His career sacks per game is the highest rate with 0.87, I believe, and the next guy's like 0.84. But just some great players on that list in terms of like J.J. Watt's on there. Just a bunch of the great defensive players of all time, and Myles Garrett to top that list. He's only played 3 years, but I think we got a lot of good things coming for Myles Garrett. Switching back over to the offensive side of the ball, and this is not a particular player, but a unit in general, the entire Seahawks offense has been killing it. We already talked about Russell Wilson being a MVP candidate. We talked about Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, one of the best duos. Behind the Cowboys duo, they're number 2, and just by like 10 or so yards. So the way Russell Wilson's been playing, I think they can take that spot easily. Chris Carson's another guy that's been showing up this year. A lot of good praise for him. Seems to have solved his fumbling issues for a few years back. But then you got other weapons as well. You got David Moore, who's a deep threat. Greg Olsen, who they signed from Carolina, putting up points. All those other tight ends. Jacob Hollister. Yeah, they're top 3 in yards per game, pass yards per game, and points per game. Only the Cowboys are the other offense with the same. But one's 4-0, the other's 1-3. So I guess it matters for some, doesn't for others. That's why I have the Seahawks at number 2. And number 1, speaking of Russell Wilson, I think the one guy that's really challenging him for the MVP spot this year is Josh Allen. I mean, the Buffalo Bills quarterback, they picked him. He was the 3rd quarterback taken in 2018. And a lot of people had problems with his accuracy, wasn't sure how he'd pan out, coming from Wyoming, unlike Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, who came from USC and Oklahoma, respectively. But right now, if he's not the MVP right now, he's the most improved player if the NFL had that award. I think the Bills' offense at 4-0, the whole team in general, Sean McDermott's doing a great job coaching him. But a lot of the things from last season that you saw, we talked about the accuracy concerns, they're not there anymore for some reason. I don't know what clicked over the offseason. Maybe he's just grown into his own, getting better as he gets older. But he's got 12 touchdowns to 1 interception. He throws one of the prettiest deep balls I've ever seen. And he's a top 3 player in most quarterback stat categories, including the quarterback rating, which is usually a stat that the best players in the league have the highest ones. And right now he's number 3 in that. The guys ahead of him, Aaron Rodgers, former MVP, Patrick Mahomes, former MVP. So I think big things are coming for Josh Allen. As a Jet fan, that kind of hurts me because our team's going this way and they're going up. But I'm excited to see what this kid can do. He's playing great football right now. Now moving on to our last segment of the day, the MLB playoffs are still in progress right now. Games are playing all last week, started again on Monday. We're in the divisional series, and I made my bracket last week. I showed you guys. And I wanted to do a segment where I looked at where I was right and where I was wrong. And as opposed as 2 of my ALCS conference series players, most of the bracket's still intact. I lost the Astros beat the Twins, and the Athletics beat the White Sox. The Marlins beat the Braves. Those are the only losses I had. But Chicago teams, you let me down. What happened? I had both of you guys going to the conference series in your respective leagues, and both of you guys got out. The Cubs got swept by the Marlins, and that's just a lot going. Congrats to my friend Wyatt. He's a big Marlins fan, bought tickets to the NLCS. Might be jumping the gun a little bit, but who knows? We'll see how that series turns out against the Braves. But the White Sox, man, come on. You were my sleeper team. You played great in Game 1. Didn't do too great in Game 2, but you looked like you were going to rebound in Game 3. You took a 3-0 lead. Then your bullpen kind of blew it. I mean, 9 walks? Are you guys kidding me? 9 different pitchers played for them. You walked in 2 consecutive runs on back-to-back batters. Honestly, you guys deserve to lose this series. But the rest of the bracket's intact, except for the Astros, who might move on to the ALCS. I mean, what is this? They weren't hitting great at all this season. What happened now? They need to win one more game against the Athletics. That's today. Game 1 against them, they scored 10 runs. Game 2, they scored 5. So I guess Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, and all those guys there started bringing out the trash cans again. Maybe not, because then they'd be in big trouble, but they're starting to hit the ball now. So they still have all this great talent. I'm not saying Altuve was only good because of the trash cans. I'm not saying Bregman was an MVP candidate because they were cheating, but they are definitely guys that have talent, and if they can figure it out, start hitting the ball better, they're going to be really dangerous. And I'm scared for whoever they have to play in the ALCS if they win this next game against the A's. But the two teams that I still have in the conference series, the Yankees in the ALCS and the LA Dodgers in the NLCS. Start off with the Dodgers. I'm going to double down on this prediction that both teams are going to make it, and I still think the Dodgers are going to win. The Dodgers, they're the Dodgers. I mean, best team in baseball, we knew that already. Best pitching staff, or one of them, we knew that already. Were they going to beat the Padres? They won Game 1. We kind of knew that was going to happen. I think it's the end of the road for San Diego. But let's talk about the Yankees, who, talking to all my Yankee friends, fan friends, they were really concerned about this series against the Rays. And right now, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, they were 1-5 against the Rays in the regular season. But this is a team that's got all their health back. I mean, Giancarlo Stanton's hit a home run in both games this series so far. They won Game 1 pretty convincingly. In Game 2, they were right in it up until the end. So they're definitely competing better than they were in the regular season against this Tampa Bay team. And I think if they can win a game or two, Garrett Cole pitching again eventually, this is a series that can be won for the Yankees, and I think they'll be able to face off against the Astros or the A's, whoever wins that series, and come out as on top of that one as well. They scored 9 runs in Game 1 of the series, and then 5 again in Game 2. But if they can figure out the pitching, especially the bullpen, which didn't look the greatest last night, I'll admit, but Game 3 is tonight. We're going to see how they do then. Hopefully my bracket, we don't have any more craziness going on. I'd like to keep it intact where it is right now, but you never know, I guess. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's show. We got some big news coming. I will be traveling to Los Angeles to visit some of my college friends this weekend, and we're going to do a special Casual Saturdays episode from there with my good buddy Noah Levine, letting me stay with him. So I figured to thank him, I'll let him be on Coast to Coast Sports. You know, we're going to talk a lot about the Dodgers. We'll talk about the Lakers if they win or lose on Friday. We'll do a full LA special for all those guys out there. And that's going to do it for me today. It's Wednesday on Coast to Coast Sports, the only show for the fans, by the fans. I'm Michael Fiumefreddo, and if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, definitely check out our Spotify where we do Casual Saturdays. We can watch all these episodes as a podcast. But that's going to do it for me. We'll see you next time on Coast to Coast Sports.